Robots. They're not the best communicators. Today's topic is about executive communication and how to not be a robot while doing it. What do you think? Couldn't care less. This is the Go Fungal Podcast. Wendy Serafin is a highly experienced communications leader with experience working for companies big and small, from FinTech to consulting and a lot more. She's held leadership roles in startups and in big corporations. Wendy, you've seen communication work pretty well, and you've seen it work not so pretty well, I bet.
Cool.
We're talking today about executive communication and how do we build trust with employees and what that looks like. I'm an executive. I tell people I'm an executive, but I mostly focus on money and power. So why do I need my employees to trust me?
I would say,
what's in it for me?
Yeah, I know what's in it for you. I would say if that's your motto, you're not going to go very far with employees or recruiting employees, like recruiting team members. It really comes down to just building trust with your leader, with your team and your employees, and being authentic and honest in how you're leading the company, and building that in ways that feels true to who the person is. They're human first. And that's really what's most important. Everyone wants to see the company succeed. Everyone wants to see that each other build their careers and move up. But at the end of the day, they also want to be led by humans. And I think we've learned that quite a bit in the past few years. That's more so important than money, power, all that other stuff that comes along with it too.
But money and power is kind of a part of it though, right? Like a little bit. It's somewhere in there. I'm obviously joking with my question. It's in the mix.
Obviously, that's why the show, Succession is so popular, because, there is that aspect, and people like to see a glimpse in that world and how that works. And I come from a little bit more of a simple thought that you get what you pay for and you ask what you receive. And sometimes you may not want the repercussions of focusing only on those aspects of your career or your company.
I feel like that's what these relationships are built on. I think people are starting to know that, and that becomes, I feel like, common knowledge. I don't necessarily think that everybody knows how to get there. Let's talk about the trust component of this.
Trust is hard to build. It takes a long time, and you can break it in a second. And I think that's the biggest concern, is that it is such a huge risk, and it's a paramount thing that you absolutely need to hold at such a high standard.
Well, talk about your experience. Are there any anecdotes where a lack of trust had a negative impact, or the flip side of that, positive impact?
Absolutely. The biggest thing that I would hit on is trust always starts with the why. So usually when trust becomes an issue, or it becomes, people talk a lot more about it, is when there's going to be a tough decision, or there's tough news to deliver, or the company screwed up, or we need to talk about something that is not great. And you have to start with the why. I see this time and time again, and those that may watch this podcast will smile because they said, yeah, Wendy, that's what Wendy says. It always starts with the why. So you're going to have to make tough decisions. You're going to have to deliver bad news as a leader. That's just part of the job. But if you do it in a way that you can talk about the why and are very thoughtful and intentional about what the why is, you will continue to earn trust. And it's not a one and done thing. So not just when there's bad news, but always talk about the why. There's good decisions. Right. Why are we doing it this way? Why are we changing our strategy? Why are we growing this way? Why are we going in this market? And then you have that trust. Then when bad news does come, you have already that platform in which employees understand and they see where you're coming from.
Executives are trying to find ways to help people connect to the bigger mission of the organization, like the purpose and the why are we here in the first place. And I think the question always, if you're a for-profit company, you are trying to generate a profit, and that's part of it. But the bigger thing is that if there isn't a mission, or if we're not communicating that mission or that purpose, it's really hard for people to feel like they're connected enough and empowered enough to go above and beyond.
I would say vision mission is very important. I think I've seen it as lip service, and I've seen it truly, it runs the company. And I think leaders embracing that And staying true to that and not just talking about it and showing through actions is really important. Going back to the why, going back to how it impacts the audience, which is your employees or external audiences. And really it's not about the leader. It's about how they are leading the company, how people relate to this leader. And at the end of the day, they choose to be human first. And that's really helpful, and a mission and vision can help you align that, or at least stay true to what you're trying to accomplish long term.
Yeah. And you said something earlier about finding ways to communicate as a human and being yourself when you're communicating especially as an executive. And I think that's got to be really hard for a lot of executives, where you're in this protective mode, especially in a really big company where you literally anything you say could be used against you in some way, or maybe you've learned a way that serves you in terms of communicating. And I've seen what executives look like on TV, and that's how I talk too. I talk like a robot, and I do lip service. I'm not saying everybody's like that, but I do think you get a fair share of that. How can somebody like you, who's leading communications at a company, help them become more human in their communication?
I think first it starts with self-awareness, and communication folks have to play that uncomfortable role where we have to coach and we have to provide feedback. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's maybe don't say it that way, just so you know it might have landed this way. Oh, by the way, you have mustard on your shirt. So we kind of run the gamut of
every time somebody's told me you have mustard on your shirt. I have 4 times.
We have that interesting position where we have to play that role across. And so we also see the uncomfortable side. We'll see behind the scenes. If an executive's prepping for an interview, or we're prepping them for a media thing, and we're going to ask tough questions because we want to get them uncomfortable, because that's where maybe the message kind of slips. They go off on a tangent where you don't want to go, especially if it's a tough conversation. So we see them when they're vulnerable, but nobody likes to be vulnerable. No one likes to show that they may or may not know the answer. The challenge is that's what employees like to see. They like to see their leaders be people first. And you don't have to look vulnerable like you don't know the answer, but it goes to the fact that you can relate to others. You find a connection that is not just CEO employee, but employee partner in this vision that we're all trying to accomplish. And I think we've seen that so much more so in the past 3 years that people just are starting to demand it. They work for the people they want to work for, and they'll leave the people that they don't want to work for. And we're seeing it more and more that people just want real human connection, and they're gonna come in and they're gonna do their best work. And they want to work for people that value them as a human, whoever they are. If they're a mom, a dad, they're a caretaker, what have you. There's more layers to folks, and I think they want to see that in their leaders as well. So show, interesting things. It may take some time. It may be uncomfortable. I would say one example that I love that really worked really well is we had a former CEO. We did Friday videos during the pandemic. We needed to connect with folks. It was really hard. We were very in-office culture. And one Friday, he decided to just play the piano and sing with his daughter. And that,
really?
People loved it. People loved it for a variety of reasons. I think we just needed something else to talk about besides what's going on in the business, because that's what the role of a CEO is. And in the end, it was really seeing him connect and seeing him in a different light, but still as a leader of the company, but confident enough that he wanted to show a different aspect of who he was. And I would just tell leaders to don't shy away from that. People enjoy learning interesting things beyond just what you are as a leader of a company.
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes me think about LinkedIn and this conversation that's happening about whether or not people should share personal things on LinkedIn or not.
Right.
And where is the line in the sand?
It's a hard one. I've seen it go both ways. I'm probably a little bit more conservative on mine just because once it's out there, you never get it back. But I also have seen it force really good conversations and people finally saying, thank you, finally, yes, I feel the same way. It's hard. So you just have to balance it out. That's why you have folks, you maybe have a communication counselor, a conscience, someone like me that says, actually, this is really good and this will land well. Or probably not the time or the place. I get your intent, but let's maybe think about it this way. So I think there's room for both. I love that LinkedIn is getting a little bit more personal because our lives are just are always been blurred. Now it's okay. There's more permission to do so, which right or wrong, it's kind of where we are at.
To build on that too, just the fact that we spent in the pandemic, we saw a window into each other's personal lives, literally coming into the office through your home office in your home. And some people have their bedroom in the background or their living room or whatever, their cat or their dog is like running around with their kid. We really got personal.
Agree. And at the end, and that we're never going back to that. So I guess understanding your communication and how you lead, because now that the expectation has been changed, the goal line has changed, and just embracing that and leveraging it, because there's some really cool things that could come out of being a leader that does embrace it more than others that may not, and just ignore the fact that we aren't humans. We don't have lives. There are other aspects of who we are and what we do. I actually work with a CEO of a organizational firm, and she talks a lot about superpowers and X factor and how people they're not good at everything, and they might be good at some really good things that may or may not be part of their job description, but when they given the time and the ability to stretch that and leverage that in their role, interesting things can happen. And I think embracing folks with talents that may not be directly tied to what their role is an interesting aspect to leading and just finding some interesting value within your employee base, which goes beyond communication.
Right. And I think that's the key here is like, we're talking about communication. How can executives communicate and build trust with employees? Obviously there's a lot more to it than this, right? There's a foundation, right? We're human. We have to be vulnerable. We have to find human connection. That's the end goal. But there are ways that we can communicate, right?
Exactly. And at the end of the day, you don't talk to your family or friends that way. So why would you do it at work? I think we've finally blurred that a little bit. And communication is the means in which you can build the trust, but having a core true to self mindset is the first step.
People say being authentic, right, is really important. All right, let's talk about practical tips. So for other communication, PR leaders, what are like 3 to 5 practical tips that you can share with them to help prepare executives to be more authentic?
Building the trust. So building the trust starts with being more observant. I would say being a better listener. Listen more, talk less. I know people have said that time and time again, but it truly is important, especially at this day and age with being hybrid and not having as many social cues if you were in person, but listening more, asking good questions, being present in terms of the conversation. Those are things that are very helpful to just being more authentic, building trust, building engagement with your employees, with your leaders. Even put it on a sticky note that says, be present, ask questions, listen more.
Yeah, all this seems to just be going back to building social emotional intelligence. It's all about building your self-awareness, building your social awareness.
Right. And having a team, whether it's your leadership team, whether it's a communication leader, having that person also call you on it and being okay to be called on it. And reminding them in terms of, hey, you really talked over a lot of folks here. There was some really interesting conversations or feedback they really wanted to deliver. But as a leader, they're going to default if you don't give them the time or space to be able to communicate a question or feedback of some sort. And having folks that will tell you that and embrace that feedback is really helpful. So again, going back to having like a communication conscience or someone that's a good counsel to you, I think is really important, especially for CEOs, especially for founders, folks that you really need to have that conscience, whether it's a Post-it note or a person poking you saying, hey, listen more.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm thinking about some tactics that communications leaders like yourself are using with executives or to support executives to help them show up, build that trust. You mentioned videos during the pandemic. It's Friday videos. What are some of the things? Are there other tactics like that you think you find are effective that other communications leaders might want to consider? So a video a week as a way to just be visible and to share, but also in that moment you said your executive was being vulnerable, just playing the piano, which I thought was cool. Are there other types of tactics like that you think would be helpful?
I would say frequency and visibility is critical. So the other thing that I think is very helpful is just if you are still in a hybrid or a virtual world, just more frequency and touch points. that people can get together to talk or have feedback or share different things. And it can be short on a Thursday, and it's an open forum in which leadership is there. But the frequency is probably critical, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be planned. Pull some fun into it. One of the things that we did is we would always open up. We would just be playing a fun Friday song just to change the mood so it doesn't feel so formal. Frequency and consistency is key, because if it's few and far between and you're waiting once a quarter to communicate out, and that's the time that you've touched most employees in terms of communication, that's probably not enough.
People talk a lot about this with any kind of, when you're trying to get good at anything. I was just going to the gym, and we have a coach who talks about consistency over quality even. Yes. You don't have to be perfect in the moment. If you do it consistently, regularly, frequency, like you said, you get better over time. But at the same time, it's more effective when you're consistent. So if you're going to the gym or something, or eating nutritiously, you can eat one day and eat really good food for one day, amazing food. But if you don't do it consistently with frequency, it doesn't really matter. Even if you were to just change one little thing and do that once a week, I think that's pretty important. So frequency, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, setting the time. And really, yes, exactly. Like setting the time, blocking the time to focus on ensuring that you're communicating. It can be as simple as a calendar, keeping you honest. But to your point, regular, consistent visibility is critical, especially now when there's still just so much uncertainty still to this day, and where things are going, what's happening. People are just nervous. And the one thing that's constant is having a leader that shows up frequently.
Okay, so I got to ask you, what's something about you that most colleagues wouldn't know and might find surprising, interesting, or unique?
Probably two things. One, more frequently, I actually run the social media for the varsity soccer team for both my boys are on the team. I have one still on. And I've been doing it for about 4 years. And they didn't have an Instagram, so I created that. But what was interesting is that initially they didn't know I was doing it. They thought it was a student. If you ever want to test your cool factor and your coolness factor, try to run social media where your audience is teenagers. And it's a very humbling, a very hard, but it's probably my favorite thing I do. The pay is horrible. The benefits are awful, but it is probably the most rewarding thing I have, because you see them share it, you see them comment, you see the interaction. I love it. And some people don't know that I do it, it's just fun too.
They think it's probably a really hip high school kid just doing their thing.
Yes.
I mean, you're hip.
I try to be.
I think.
I try to be. I would say the other thing is, this is going back to my college days. And so I was on the dance team in Wisconsin. So I was out there on the field in front of 70,000 fans every home game, doing my thing. I think there was one time I did get a close-up on ESPN. I never saw it. I could never find the clip. But I was out there doing that. So people don't always know that until it's homecoming and somebody posts a picture on social, and then they say, I didn't know you were in that.
That's so awesome. I didn't know you were a dancer. I didn't know that that's amazing. That's so cool.
Yes. So
you still have some of the skills, or do you bust them out every once in a while?
We do. We actually are meeting at the end of October for the 50th reunion, and we will all go out there and do On Wisconsin, and we'll try to remember how to do it.
That's awesome.
It's very fun.
What is a word or phrase that we should stop using in the workplace?
I know there's so many. This is one of my fun things I love to talk to folks about, because it just drives me crazy. So probably for me, it is circle back, pick your brain. What was another one that I had? Do you have bandwidth? There's so many. And my favorite, actually, and it's still up because I checked it, it's called the BS generator. And you can literally type in a phrase and it will spit out one of these phrases for you.
Like you can type a regular phrase that will give you a jargony phrase?
Yes. And I would almost challenge folks to see if they can do a whole conversation using whatever that spits out and see if anyone picks up on it.
Okay. We're going to have to find that. And link to it.
It's a good Friday afternoon.
Yeah, we'll circle back to that.
A little out of the box for you.
Yes. We'll see if we have bandwidth. We'll see. All right. Finish this sentence, and in an old-timey voice, if you'd like. You know what really grinds my gears?
Yeah. I would say, you know what really grinds my gears is people that don't put their grocery carts away. And here's why I say that. Or they do not open the door or hold the door. Because that says a lot about who people are. And I've seen it written up a few times, and maybe I'm more observant about it now because we're home more and go to the grocery store on a Tuesday or something. But those that return the grocery cart or that take the extra second to open the door or hold the door tells you a lot about who that person is. And it could be a metaphor with how they are in different situations, but it just drives me crazy if you don't put your grocery cart away.
And you see it all over the place. The cart's scattered everywhere. And so, Steve, I'm calling you out.
Yeah. Put your grocery cart away.
I don't know if he's listening to this, but if you are listening to this, put the cart away, man. It's like not that hard. Just push it over there. It's not a big deal. Wendy sees you.
Yes. I will call you out on it.
All right. Last thing is book, podcast, or article that we got to check out ASAP. Why?
Yes. So my favorite podcast, and it's not earth-shattering, is the New York Times Daily. I love it because it is very good at storytelling. It takes a big issue and then breaks it down into a more human element or storytelling that folks can relate to. They just do such a great job. I enjoy it so very much. And then I would say book-wise. So one, I'm going to pull one out of the archives. So there was a book when I was in grad school that my marketing strategy professor recommended. He says it's fascinating. And this was in the 2000s, the dot-com boom. And it was called The Nudist on the Night Shift by Poe Bronson.
Okay.
And it was really about that time of those years where, I don't even know if it was years, everyone was, we're going IPO. Are you going IPO? When are you going IPO? And very interesting. And he was a journalist that was following all these different dot-com CEOs as they're going through this. And with the premise that there was this rumor that there was this nudist on the night shift that would work the night shift at some dot-com company naked. Now, I don't know if he ever found it. I can't remember. I need to go back and read the book. But it was just the dynamics that were happening during that time. And what was interesting is I see that with what we were seeing maybe last year with people going IPO and we're going SPAC. And are you going SPAC? And everyone is a SPAC. And it reminded me of that book. And I would just encourage anyone to take a look at it. It's a really good light read. It's fascinating. He does a very good job of getting into just the personalities that were going on at that time. And obviously the bust happened right after that. Highly recommend. And then I would also say a network colleague of mine, which I want to get, the book doesn't come out till October, but it's called Grace, President Obama and the 10 Days in the Battle of America. For America. And it's about these 10 days when it's the chief speechwriter that was partnering with President Obama during the time when there was the white supremacy riots. The Supreme Court was going to rule on marriage equality and Affordable Act. And he was basically working these 10 days straight. They work all the time, but on speechwriting for all these huge things that were happening within this 10-day time period. And it goes into just how they were working through the speeches and drafts and conceptualize what they wanted to say. And obviously such a powerful delivery, that high bar to make sure you hit it right. And you had to hit it right because these are major, major things. So really cool book. I can't wait to read it, especially for anyone that's interested in like speech writing for executives or whoever. I think it would be really cool.
Well, Wendy, I think the headline here is...
Put your grocery cart away.
Right. And if you're going to be an executive and you're going to communicate with employees, be more human. Mm-hmm. And we can help you do that, right, as communications leaders. And Wendy, I really always appreciate your guidance and your knowledge. And you dropped a lot of really wonderful knowledge nuggets, if I could say, today. So I really appreciate you joining us for the show today.
Awesome. It was awesome. Thanks, Matt.